Good afternoon and welcome back to Storytime. Chapter 4 of Sam Campbell's book, Too Much Salt and Pepper. Two porcupines with prickly spines who make you laugh and think. Chapter 4. Magic Night with Monkey Shines. Balsam juice. There are times in the forest life that are made just for the unusual adventure. One who lives in the woods quickly recognizes such charmed hours. I doubt if anyone can just say just what distinguishes them. Nevertheless, occasionally there is a sacred something in the mood of nature which promises great things. All the little living things fall into this spell, and the whole woodland world moves in mysterious ways about one common purpose. While we often feel this mood during daylight hours, it reaches its height only as darkness creeps over the world. Magic night is the name we have for such precious periods. And it does seem that the fairies, gnomes, nymphs, and spirits created by human imagination might come trooping out of secret doors in trees and rocks, or come sliding down on starbeams. That spring a magic night came to the sanctuary. Jenny recognized it and called me to look out our door, into the gathering gloom. Salt and Pepper, for once, were quiet. They stretched out on the limb of a tree, feet hanging down and eyes open, just looking into the night. There would be adventure in the forest tonight, Jenny affirmed. The sky had blushed beautifully at the last caress of the sun, and now an afterglow held the horizon as if nature were clinging to her memory of the day. Venus, an evening star, was shining like a jewel worn on the breast of night. The sweet breath of the forest bore the pungent perfume of countless woodland blossoms. A pleasant nocturnal chill crept over the earth, and a mist began to rise like a veil nature was drawing across her face. The night is calling. Shall we go? I asked, but Jenny did not wish to go. She had writing to do, she said. I knew well about that writing, another of those mysterious letters that arrived and must be answered. My questions always drew the same evasive answers, the same provoking wink and smile, so I had learned it was little use to press the matter. Then, if you do not mind, I shall go alone, I said. We must not waste a magic night, you know. Please do, insisted Jenny, and I'll be waiting to hear of your adventure. I walked through the darkness to the shore where my canoe was always waiting. Salt and Pepper never stirred as I passed beneath them. Would that I could charm them as this night had done, I thought, recalling their nibblings and gnawings. But I knew this power would never be mine. For a moment I stood beside the canoe, drinking in the growing glory about me. In the distance a great horned owl haunted the rich gloom with his hollow voice. Tree toads were calling. There came the last sleepy notes of a robin. Some creature, a deer or bear, was wading along in shallow waters on a distant shore, splashing musically. Back of all else was the rhythmic murmur of hordes of insects. In the dark, these sounds seemed unattached, as if the night itself thus spoke in countless tongues. Now I slipped the canoe into the water, and sculling silently over the smooth surface, approached the mainland. Towering trees loomed like a great cloud over me as I neared the shore. Back of me now lay the island silhouetted against the afterglow, the lighted cabin windows looking like little peepholes in the darkness, through which we might see into a realm of even greater glory. And I remember saying quietly to myself, I wonder if there is anything in creation more beautiful than that. A cabin with lighted windows standing on a pine-covered island, silhouetted against the afterglow, seen on a magic night. Some way it seems to be the meeting point of what is human in nature and what is natural in man, revealing that which is divine. I landed and walked through the darkness along the trail that circles our mainland cabin. No need to use the flashlight I carried in my pocket. I knew every foot of this trail, every bush, every tree. I knew when I was at the hillside where Babette the fawn had loved to sun herself, knew when I had passed the little animal runway where Rack and Roo and the raccoons came and went, knew when I was approaching the old red pine stump on which had been placed a cake of salt as an offering to all visiting creatures, but particularly as a gift to Inky the porcupine. But here something caused me to stop and listen. There was a creature at the salt lick. First I heard the rustling about in the leaves that might have been caused by almost any kind of animal. I listened anxiously, then came sounds which left no doubt of the identity of the sound maker. Crunch, 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 as chisel-like teeth bit into the wood of the salt-soaked stump, and then I heard the soft, happy grunts of a porcupine. Could this possibly be my old friend Inky? My heart pounded with delight. Suppressing excitement as best I could, I gave the porcupine call. the one for companionship or attention. The crunching stopped, so did the happy grunts. Inky, I ventured the name, and then followed with a message in Porcupinese. There was no reply immediately. However, neither was there a hurried flight by the animal, and this encouraged me. Taking one cautious step at a time, I moved toward the salt lick. It was now about 30 feet away. All the while I was talking my most cultured Porcupinese, interspersed with a few enticing human words. Within about 10 feet of the stump, I paused. Still, there was no sound from the creature. I turned on my flashlight. There sat an enormous old porky, looking calmly and inquisitively in my direction. I was convinced. Inky? Inky, you blessed old scamp, is it you? He did not move. This assured me more than anything else that it was he. A wilder creature would be gone before this. I approached him cautiously, talking constantly in soft tones. After I had emitted a long series of porky words intended to be happy grunts, he made several little sounds in reply. Fully confident now that this was my pet, I knelt near him. Not more than 3 feet separated us. He did not move. I reached out a hand and he sniffed it. I touched his nose and then cautiously smoothed down the coarse quills that crowned his head. For just a moment this extreme intimacy frightened him. Long life in the forest had nearly erased from his memory this manner of greeting. He started up as if to run away, but he stopped and turned toward me again. Honk, 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 honk. His calls became more strong and confident. He was remembering me. 4 years now this little creature had lived a normal porcupine life in the forest. 4 years of problems which daily directed him to develop and depend upon his instincts. Yet the love he had established in his heart for human friends lived on. And there we sat that magic night, a porcupine and a man, our world for the moment a tiny bubble of light, the flashlight made in an infinitude of darkness, but each one happy in his own way that he had found the other. Inky, you bedraggled, quill-covered, ornery-looking old rascal, said I, accustomed to abusing those I love. I never saw anything in my life that looked worse and yet looked better to me than you. In times past I always had given Inky the power of human speech in my imagination. We had carried on many a fancied conversation together. That magic night he gained voice once more in the same way. Well, Sammy, old kid, he replied with a twitch of his nose, you wouldn't take any prizes in the porcupine beauty contest yourself, you white-skinned, thin-haired, dull-toothed, earthbound scamp. It's right good to see you. Bend over here while I set a quill in your ear just for old time's sake. You would, you bum, I said, taking care that he did not get a hold of me. Stand still while I look you over. What a whopper you are. Inky was an enormous porcupine. I looked at him in amazement. He would weigh well over 20 pounds, and his great coat of quills made him look much heavier than that. His quills were very coarse, some of them 4 inches long, and light in color, so that he presented a gray appearance. His babyhood blackness had earned him the name of Inky had entirely vanished. Now he became a bit bolder, apparently recalling more and more of our friendship. I had dropped to a sitting position on the ground. He moved to me, step at a time, until his front feet were in my lap, and he was looking into my face, freely talking his happy grunts. I grunted right back at him. How I wished I could really learn from him his adventures during those long months in the forest. What fine sights he must have seen from his perch high in a tree. Seems to me, he said, seems to me like you talk better Porky than you used to. Lost some of that human accent. I'm having lots of practice these days, Inky. I was stroking his head again. Have you heard about Salt and Pepper? Humph, I've heard about him. He shook his quills in obvious disgust. A couple of young punks, if you ask me. Is that the best you could get? I laughed. Inky, I do believe you are jealous. What? Jealous of those young twig chewers? He chattered his teeth. Bet I can girdle a maple tree faster than they can bite off a lily pad. A look at the great amber-colored teeth at the front of Inky's mouth would suggest that this might be true. But they skinned a 40-foot red pine for me, I taunted. Ah, balsam juice. It took 2 of them to do it, didn't it? Someday, come back to see the white pine I skinned all by myself. One of your big ones out near Vanishing Lake. I tell you it would take a dozen of those little monkeys to make one good porcupine. And of a sudden he flew into a spasm of his old-time toughness, whirling, first one way, then the other, lashing back and forth with his tail and chattering his teeth. I laughed at his antics. How well I remembered how he used to execute this dervish dance on our cabin floor, sending us up on chairs or anywhere to get out of the way. I told him I would have to admit that he was quite a porcupine. But right when Inky's dance was at its height, there came the sound of breaking twigs back in the forest. Inky heard it and stopped to listen. There were more sounds. Some heavy creature was coming. Inky made a dash for a tree and climbed to safety. "So long, old top," I whispered. "I'll meet you here again." "That's a date," said Inky, and so it proved to be on many occasions that summer. Now I moved back of a bit of brush, shut off the flashlight, and waited. Closer and closer came the sound trail of the newcomer, moving unhurriedly but steadily. I heard the leaves stir on the ground, heard the twigs crack, heard bushes rustle as something forced its way through them. At last the sounds were right at the salt lick. I turned on the flashlight. There stood a magnificent doe. The light did not frighten her in the least. She was pawing at the stump a little and licking the wood below the cake of salt. Occasionally she lifted her beautiful head and looked alertly into the night. Her great cupped ears turned constantly, pointing ahead to the sides and even back of her as she kept the whole forest under attention. An idea came to me, though perhaps I was expecting too much of this magic night. Could this be Babette? If Inky had held his liking for our sanctuary and had made the Salt Lick a calling place, would it be impossible that our fawn should do the same? Babette! My voice trembled a little. Babette! The doe's ears came forward and she was all attention. Yet, despite my anxiety, I could not accept this as proof. Any deer would have reacted in the same way to any sound. Babette, is that you? I asked the question with all of my heart, and yet I knew that I would never have an answer. There was no mark nor manner about this lovely creature that would prove it was our former friend. We had no language in common. The deer is the most silent of all forest creatures, having no sound other than the whistling snort which is given an alarm. I could not grunt out a conversation as with Inky. The most satisfaction I could know was that it could be Babette there before me. This was a big doe. Babette would be of good size now, for she would be 4 years old. This creature had come from the direction of the valley in which Babette had made her wildwood home. She had come to the cabin where Babette had been cared for as a fawn. It could be, and I felt happiness even in the possibility. The doe finished her refreshment at the salt lick. Unhurried, she moved into the dark forest from which she had come. I could follow her far into the dark distance by the sounds of breaking twigs, rustling leaves, and brush. Perhaps there was a tiny spotted baby of hers back in there somewhere, curled up on the ground, implicitly obeying orders to remain absolutely silent until the mother's return. Jenny listened to a detailed account of the adventure, as we sat before a dancing great fire. She was delighted to hear of Inky's presence. "And couldn't we just call this doe Babette?" she asked. "You know it could be." "Babette is a good name for any deer," I commented, and from that night on, any deer seen at that salt lick was Babette as far as we were concerned. "And now," said I, with a meaning look, "you have written another letter. Am I to learn anything about that mystery?" There came that smile and sly wink. "Not even a magic night can get you that," said Jenny. "That's what I thought," said I, resignedly. And that's chapter 4. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless.